I used an extremely lazy strategy to beat brutal difficulty, and the build is absurd because my cities are bad. My units are weak. I've barely explored the world map, and despite this, I absolutely butcher the 3 AI when they come try to stop me from achieving a magic victory. I designed this build with the intention of having it succeed no matter how terrible my starting position is. Age of Wonders 4 decided to put my design to the test when I loaded into the map, because in order for my build to work late game, I need my cities to be very close to each other, but the map limited my space a lot more than I was hoping for, causing me to build the most pathetic trio of cities I have ever created. To make this strategy work despite my terrible cities, I only need the Mystic Society trait Ancient Wise Ones. This society significantly increases my research speed at the cost of making my research a lot more random. I'm going to use this to push to the end game tier 5 magic tome as quickly as possible by choosing whatever research takes the least number of turns. This is because in Age of Wonders 4, you don't need to research everything. You just need to finish enough projects to complete your research cycle to go to the next tome. So by choosing whichever one requires the least turns to research, I can advance quickly even though my cities are kinda trash. Here's the starting sheet with the exact build I used, and let's get this game started. At the start of the game, I zoomed all the way out to see where I was on the world map and saw that I was pretty close to the top right corner, which is going to be a blessing and a curse, but we'll get into that later. I went to my city and started working on a library because I want to pump my knowledge up as quickly as possible, and then I immediately got into a battle, which I did auto combat because this is a lazy play, so I'm not going to be doing manual combat except if necessary in the last 15 turns. I saw that I'd lost a unit, which was absolutely slaughtering the perfectionist inside me, but I tried to push past it as I went into my research and picked up the Lightning Torrent ability. This ability is going to be very helpful for thinning out enemy armies before I start the fight to try and keep my casualties to a minimum. I met my first free city, which is kind of bad news because I need to settle my first outpost literally right next door to them. But I'm gonna just keep doing this playthrough anyways, and I'm gonna let whatever happens happen. I kept on researching more knowledge and moved my hero up to settle my third city in probably a worse spot than the second one. But it's not going to matter. I have a plan in mind, don't worry. After a successful auto battle, I ended the turn, and now on turn 5, I officially have 2 outposts set up, and that is all the outposts I'll need for this game. Once I get enough Imperium, I'm going to turn both of these outposts into cities, and my great empire will have been established. I finished researching Lightning Torrent, which is an enemy army spell. It lets me do direct damage to an enemy army before the fight even begins, and this is going to be so important for the progression of this game. But for now, I won't be able to use it very often because I don't have enough mana to just keep casting it over and over again. With my second city founded, I was able to recruit a second hero, which is very important because heroes are going to be the majority of my army in this game. When selecting arcane research, I pretty much just take whichever one is going to take the least number of turns and try to take the one with the exclamation point next to it because that means the cost is being reduced by my society trait. And I'm just taking as much knowledge production in my cities as I can possibly afford. Plus, with my third city set up, I was able to get my third hero, and that is all the heroes I'm gonna need for this game. My main army is all set. I can use my summoning abilities to summon an army on the fly for myself if I have enough mana, which I don't really have enough mana, but I can get a couple units in. And having a few units in the army gives me much better results when I go into combat, and it makes it so that I don't need to use my army spell quite as often. And thanks to the society trait that I chose, it reduces the cost of summoning by half, so it's not too bad. And anytime one of my units dies in combat, I don't have to plan ahead to get a replacement, I just summon it into my army and keep going. I got another upgrade that speeds up my research, so now I'll be able to advance even faster, as long as I'm willing to accept the random selection that has a reduced cost. For my tier 2 tome, I got the Tome of Inquisition because Burden of Guilt is extremely important for my endgame strategy. But I wasn't able to take it immediately because it didn't have the discount. Hopefully it'll be offered to me again soon. The game offered me another choice that I needed, and I didn't want to have to roll the dice too much, so I took Mass Condemnation over the discounted research choice. At the end of turn 17, I met the first enemy AIs, and decided to play nice for now to keep them off my back. because I'm still advancing through the research tomes and I need a little bit more time before I'm ready to take the fight to them. I took blessed reinforcements so I can summon units in the free cities that I govern. And with pretty much all of my hero level up abilities, I'm trying to take things that summon more units. This will be very important when we get to the final 15 turns. I'm also taking pretty much all of the abilities in the battle magic area so that I have lots of ranged attack options. One of the AIs was a little bit ahead of me in their quest to get a magical victory, but it's okay. I'll catch them in the end. Okay, I just took a second to stop and look at the expansion of my cities. The city literally only has 5 provinces and can't get bigger. They're such stupid shapes. There's nothing good going on here. This is so bad, but it isn't going to matter. I have a plan. It's going to work out. I promise. I hope. So I'm gonna start my Seed of Order in this city here. I've also started summoning Blessed Souls in my vassal city in hopes that they'll defend me when the time comes. And I'm going to summon a lot of Blessed Souls for them. So I'm really hoping that their army is going to be the first line of defense against the enemy AIs. I started my Seed of Order on turn 22 and was able to start my Root of Order on turn 29. So I'm making good progress. But my enemies are making good progress too, because they have finished their Root of Nature much before I finished my Root of Order. Part of the reason why I'm going to be using enemy army spells is because you can actually store them up in previous turns and then unleash them all at the same time and use all of your remaining world casting points to refresh them and use them even more, all in a single turn. This gives me the ability to have extremely explosive burst turns where I just nuke an army down all in one go and make it so that it can barely defend itself against my very pathetic army. So I took 300 combat power away from them before the fight, and the fight went beautifully. My lazy strategy was ready to get put to the test because I am now at tier 5 magic tomes, which brings with it a new army spell, but more importantly, it brings with it the ability to cast the endgame magic victory spell, which reduces the cost of all order spells by 50%. When you combine that with the Root of Order, which reduces them by 20%, you're looking at a 70% cooldown reduction in a ton of army spells that I can spam over and over again, all in a single turn, to nuke my enemies down before sending my pitiful army to finish them off. One quick word of warning, I actually encountered a bug where if you save the game and, leave for whatever reason and then load back in, you lose the 50% reduction in cost that the Age of Order spell is giving you. So you actually can't save the game and reload at any point during these last 15 turns. You have to play it all out as it happens. Hopefully they'll catch this bug at some point and fix it, because it was kind of a bummer when I experienced it. I had to go back to an auto save and I lost a couple of turns of gameplay, but it's not that big of a deal. I went back, started again, the AIs declared war on me immediately, and I took advantage of the reduced cost to summon an outrageous amount of Blessed Souls for my vassal, because they're my first line of defense. And if it sounds like I'm pinning too much of my hopes on them, it's because I was pinning too much of my hopes on them. Carissa's army was the first one to approach, and I can use my army spells to weaken her down to the point of barely even being a fight. And Burden of Guilt is actually insanely important at the end of the game because it's extremely inexpensive and it takes away 50% of the movement speed that the attackers have on the world map, which can slow their approach and stagger your enemies so that you can fight them in smaller batches. The third AI wanted to team up with me, but I said no, and he didn't like that and declared war on me 2 turns later. So now I'm at war with all 3 AIs in the game, and they are all coming to get me. Because of Burden of Guilt, Carissa's approach was very slow. She didn't have enough movement speed to get to me quickly, which gave me more turns to cast army spells on her. I started wiping out her main army so easily. In fact, I was able to completely wipe out the army that she was ruling and take her down without even getting into a fight. I then got to work bolstering my army with the Rally of the Lieges, and I was able to do it for extremely cheap, because the Order Affinity lets me get skills that reduce the cost by 50% and also give bonus ranks to the units when they're recruited to my army. I started off with just the tier 4 and the tier 3 unit, and hopefully I won't need to get any more than that. When you attempt a magic victory, the game spawns armies right next to your improvements in an attempt to destroy them, which is why I built all of my improvements right next to each other. This is a lazy game. I don't feel like maneuvering my army around to a bunch of different cities trying to figure out which one's gonna get attacked and where I need to be to defend. I just put all of my improvements right next to each other, bordering each other, so that my hero army can just hang out in the area and respond to whichever one is being threatened. And with all my enemy army spells, the fight is much more likely to go in my favor by the time I actually start the battle. But with such a lazy playstyle and such a weak army, I was bound to end up in this situation eventually. The odds are not in my favor in this fight, and I hit the auto battle button, hoping for the best, but expecting this. My heroes all died and only reduced the enemy army's combat strength by 39 from their starting position of 1,800. So let's see if a little manual combat is able to fix this situation. My hero builds were specifically designed to be ready for this, and that's why we have so many summoning abilities. By summoning units to slow down and tank the enemy army, it gives me more turns to use my combat magic, which is extremely powerful because of the Age of Order spell that's in effect. It gives plus 20 damage to my condemnation spell. And the summons are no joke either. They can put out a lot of damage themselves. So going through the battle was actually not nearly as hard as I was expecting it to be. Most of the battle, I just slowed the enemy down by using my summons. I did have a couple of close calls, but I was able to get out of them and fill the gaps with armies of undead, armies of elementals, by nuking my enemies from above, tearing them to pieces with my combat spells and all of the spells that my heroes have. Plus, all of my heroes have the Weaver ability, which lets them reset all of their cooldowns once per battle, so I'm able to summon all of the units that I summoned at the beginning of the fight one more time to help me stall for even longer. By the end of the battle, the enemy was fleeing in fear, and I was able to turn an impossible battle into an easy victory. Now you might be wondering, Fracture, what happened to all those blessed souls that you summoned for your loyal subject? Well, I did manage to get a few of them to fight some battles for me by summoning a unit nearby and starting the fight in range of those blessed souls. But otherwise, my ally just sat there doing nothing with the massive army that I had created for him, and honestly, it was a huge disappointment. One of two things must have happened here. Either one, I don't understand how to control my allies' units in combat, or two, this game needs to add a little bit of extra control in how you can direct the forces of your vassals. The rest of the game went according to plan, with me wiping out my enemies with auto battles, nuking their armies down before even getting into the fight by using my army spells, and just completely controlling the flow of my enemies by using Burden of Guilt to slow their movement on the world map so that they arrived at me when I was ready for them. After a few questionable moves by the AI, victory was finally mine. Thanks for watching, and I hope I'll see you in the next one.